Welcome to In the Garden. I'm your host, Joyce Hochsprung, McLeod County Master Gardener. I hope you'll come along with us today. We're going to do some container plantings. I am a give them room to grow person. So in this container, I'm gonna put, I think I've got 7 plants here, which doesn't sound like much, but it will fill in. But it depends on the plants you're using. I've got a silverberry or silver wave petunia here, which is going to roughly fill up over half the container and it'll wind its way through. If you're using petunias that are only going to spread 10 inches, you're going to need more. So it depends on your plants. Now I'm going to start with this elephant ear in the center. This one is called Coffee Cups. It says it could get 36 to 60 inches. I doubt if we're going to hit 60 inches here in Minnesota unless we have a really warm summer, but you never know. So we're going to loosen up these roots. Tease them out a bit so it can get growing into the soil. This one isn't too badly pot bound, so. And I want this roughly in the middle because this is going to be my tallest piece. A little bit deeper. Tuck that in. And just for fun, I thought I'd try a few celotias this year. This is a little taller one. It'll get about 3 feet. Selway terracotta, which is kind of a gold color. So we're going to tuck that into the center also. Yeah, we'll space it out, give them a little room here. And then we're going to put in some of my fillers and spillers and such. Because this is the north side of the pot and it doesn't get quite as much sun when this stuff gets up here, I'm going to tuck my petunia over here, my coleus over here, and we'll put this Plectranthus, tuck that in. Nope, I think we'll switch and do the Penta over here and put these guys over here. This, in case you're not familiar with this one, is a Persian shield plant. And I love the purple and green, and it'll get kind of silvery. And it tends to wind its way. It'll come up for a while and then it'll start winding its way through the pot. So it's kind of a fun one. I'm going to start with a Tidal Wave Silver here, petunia. And the tidal waves you can get seed for if you want to start from seed. I do a couple varieties of wave petunias every year just because I use quite a few, and it gets, with the number of pots I have, it gets pretty expensive otherwise. So, and I find they're pretty easy to start from seed, usually in February, early February or so. I start them, they're really tiny at first. But once they get started, let's see, we'll put this over here. And it wants to kind of grow this way, so we're going to tilt that to the outside edge a little bit. Tuck the dirt in around. And this is a Penta. If you're not familiar with Penta, they're star flowers. A little hard to find, and they just are pollinator and hummingbird bees just love these little guys. They can be a little hard to find. You have to do a little hunting, but they are out there, and they come in pink and white, kind of a magenta, and the red, I think. At least those are the ones I'm aware of. So we'll loosen those up, tuck it in. I'm going to put these guys a little bit closer because I don't want them eaten by Mr. Petunia. Okay. We'll get the, like I said, I like to tuck my tags in. That way if somebody comes out and says, what's that plant? And I have a senior moment and go, I can pull the tag and look at it. I kind of like the gold and purple on the leaf, on the underside of the leaves, kind of a purplish tone. And this is another one that'll kind of wind its way through and around. It'll pop out on the other side somewhere, and some will come over the edge. And the strobilanthus. Ooh, that's got some tight roots down here. We'll get those loosened up. Now a little hint, say you're having a graduation or something, and you go, but I don't want to wait for them to get full. Well, maybe you don't put out quite as many pots, and I'm going to move over to the other side here so I can get this last one in. But maybe you tuck your plants in the pots just for your occasion, and then pull them out and use them in another container. Then you have that full look that you want, and you aren't tied to the watering regime all summer long. Not that I don't still water, but obviously I do. Okay, and we'll get this last one in here. I'm going to tuck him a little bit further. We'll come back and check on these in 2 or 3 weeks or a month, whenever we tape again here. Okay, and then they need a good drink. Wash all the dirt off that I managed to get on them. I have another whiskey barrel in the backyard that I put 6 plants in because I put in this geranium that I've overwintered for almost 20 years now, and it will literally take up half of the container by midsummer. So like I said, pay attention to the spacing on your tags on your plants. I like to give them room to grow, and we got this one done. We'll move on to another one. Okay, in this container I have one geranium that I wintered over. I just pull them out of the pots at the end of the season, shake off the dirt, stick them in a paper bag upside down. If they're small enough, I roll the top of the bag down, stick them down, and I have a kind of a root cellar, or an area that stays between 50 and 55, kind of about 52, 53 all year long. And stick them in there, pull them out in mid-March. I throw them in a bucket of water to soak them for a few hours and then pot them up. And like I said, this one is probably at least 10 or 12 years old. So, and the only other thing I put in there was some Dichondra Silver Falls. It's a nice trailing plant by the end of the, it takes it a little while to get going. I've noticed it in a few nurseries this year. For a while it was really hard to find, so I started my own, of course, and started those like in late January, early February, stuck them under shop lights in my basement. But they will be trailing down, spreading out and covering the sides of the pot, and within a month or so. Okay, over here I'm going to show you, and I'm going to see if we can get a little bit closer up. I've taken out the top almost 6 inches of soil here, and people say, oh, you don't need that much soil. Well, I'm going to dig down, and I had in here, let's see, petunias last year, a penta, and I think a coleus. But there are roots at least down to here. So yeah, that's why I don't put things in the bottom of my containers. And I know people want them to be lighter. If you really want to do that, there's a product called, I think it's Whoops-A-Daisy, which is kind of an expandable pot insert that you can put it at whatever height you want in your pot. And the reason I don't want to put other things in here other than the root growth is you may not be familiar with a term called perched water table. Every pot has it. Down at the very bottom, the soil tends to stay more saturated, which is generally fine because there's plenty of moist, aerated soil above it. But when you raise up the bottom of your pot, you also raise up that perched water table. So if you only are using like 8 inches of the pot and putting other stuff, I've heard milk cartons and styrofoam S-shapes and crushed cans and all kinds of things. The problem with doing that is whenever you have, you know, that sounds like, or rocks, that sounds like that should add drainage, right? But it doesn't. It actually makes the drainage less, makes it worse. Because water does not move easily from one medium to another. When it hits that other stuff down there, then you raise that perched water table up again, higher. So, you know, you might say, oh good, I don't have to water my pots as often, but what happens if we get a summer where it rains every, you know, we get gully washers of 3 inches at a time. It doesn't look like that's going to happen this year, but you know, we do get those. So I just say, fill it with soil or use that Whoops-A-Daisy product. You probably have to Google it and find it. Maybe some nurseries carry it. I've never actually looked for it because I fill my pots with container soil. The other thing is if you're reusing soil and you put new soil on top, if you don't mix it in, it could have different textures and you're doing that same perched water table again. So either take it out or mix it in well with a fork or a soil knife of some sort. Okay? We're going to do that. I'm not going to plant this one, but we're going to move over and we're going to go look at how to plant a strawberry pot. Okay, we're going to talk about a strawberry pot. My hubby gifted this to me one Mother's Day. It's been quite a few years now. And he brought it home and said, okay, you need to take this to the fair and win a purple with it. So I did. But I've had fun planting it ever since. And I've learned a few tricks along the way as I planted it. I have this 1-inch PVC pipe. If you have a smaller pot, you might want to use a little bit smaller one. I wouldn't go too much smaller or it gets hard to water. And I have an old cork wrapped in Glad wrap or saran wrap or whatever to make it fit a little bit snugger. It doesn't have to be totally waterproof or tight. Some of the water can leak out the bottom. You just don't want it all gushing down through the pipe because this is going to be your main watering source once the pot's established. So you can see I've got holes drilled all around, so it's dispersing water throughout the pot at different levels. On the bottom of the drainage hole, and I do this with all my pots, just a piece of old window screen. And if you don't have that laying around, most hardware stores that do screen repairs have an abundance of it. I went in there, I don't know how many years ago, and asked for it, and I have enough that it's going to last me the rest of my life and probably well beyond. So cut a chunk of that, lay it over the drainage hole, and you don't have little critters crawling in from underneath, and you don't have dirt falling out. And then I'm just going to pop this down on top of it. Now the trickiest part is starting to get the soil in here, and you kind of have to hold this upright. And if you notice, I covered the top with saran wrap too, because if you fill this up with dirt, it doesn't work so well. I'll pull that off after everything's planted. And as you can see with this soil, I added quite a lot of vermiculite and perlite to it to make sure it drains well, because I mainly use this for succulents, and it is the easiest care pot I have. I water it maybe once a week if it hasn't rained, and that's pretty much it. Let's see if I can do this without making too big of a mess. And I've been reusing this soil because most succulents don't need a real nutrient-dense soil. In fact, prefer it that it not be. I just keep using this. I take it apart in the fall. Plants that won't winter over, I bring in the house. I pot up and try to keep alive over the winter. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. Pat that down a little bit. And we'll add some more. I want to get it just about up to the level of the lowest holes. First time I did this, I spent a fortune filling it up with all these little holes, and if you bought succulents, you know they're not inexpensive plants. So then I had an aha moment and said, well, I have a lot of ground cover sedums. Why don't I use some of those? So earlier today I went out and just dug some chunks out. This one is called Lime Zinger. Whoops. We'll tuck that back in there. And I will just kind of work this in. See if I can get that big long root in there to hold it. Bring them in a ways. And let's see. Next to it, I think we'll do Angelina here. Can be a little tricky getting them out in the fall. You have to do some wiggling because they obviously have grown. But kind of work these in. Make sure you get enough stem there so you can anchor it so it doesn't just fall out. And these will look a little sad for a week or so, and then they'll kind of take off. Dump a little bit more in. I think we will use John Creech. Hopefully I got enough of that guy. This one will have pink flowers. I didn't get quite as big a chunk, but that's okay, it will grow. What do I have there? And just to settle this a little bit, and because this is a little bit dry from being stored, even though it sat out in the rain, I'm just going to give it a quick little moisten that level. Now we'll add some more so we get up to the higher level holes. One of the first years I did this, I added a lot of poultry grit, and that works. But in a pot this size, you're adding considerable weight to it. And this is already heavy enough. You'll also notice that it's on a wheeled dolly here, and it pretty much lives on that the entire year. When it goes into the garage for the winter, that's on there too. It just sits on there. We kind of lift it off the edge and roll it right into the garage. I think we've got round leaves here, so on this one, whoops, I got some extra of that. Take that out. I think we'll put in blue spruce over here just as a little change up. And again, it'll look a little rough for a little bit. I'll probably cut a few of these back and it'll regrow and take off. Then, have to decide, do I want... Haven't had the greatest luck trying to do the hens and chicks in the pockets. Sometimes it works, some years it doesn't. I've had them fall right out on me. So I think we will use, whoops, this little guy. And since we have blue over here, I think we'll put the blue over here. And this one I think is Hispanicum. The only place I've ever seen it was from Simply Succulents, a mail order place in Wisconsin. That's where I got my start. You kind of go, ugh, because you get this pot about this big with it in, and you think, really? But now I have it in enough places I don't have to worry about it. So I think we will put this one, whose name I cannot remember. And I have more of this if I need to go and get a little bit more. But I think probably this will get it started. Whoops. Pull those roots through to the inside and add some more dirt. Okay. Most of this stuff is overwintered, some in various stages of looking good, some not so good, but usually once it gets outside after a week or two, it's good to go. Now, I know that this one, even though it's little, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of this one. I think it's a Graptolium, possibly. I know it has the potential to get fairly tall, so I'm going to tuck that one in here next to the watering tube. Whether or not it does, we'll find out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do. I was going to put this Mangavi back in, but I looked at it and thought, no, I think it needs its own pot all by itself. It's really gotten quite large. We're going to take this Haworthia that's on the dry side here. It'll probably be happy to get a little more water. This time of year, my plants in the house get pretty neglected. Call it tough love. If they live, they live. If they don't, oh well. So sad. And this one, at least in here, has not gotten real tall, so I'm going to kind of put it nearer the edge. A flowering plant that works well in here and is kind of hard to find. You used to be able to find it. It's not. Haven't seen it in the last few years. Is one called Telotus Joey. It's kind of a fun, it doesn't really look like a succulent, but it kind of is. Okay, this little guy also gets quite tall, so we're going to tuck him around here. Kind of threw some dirt on him. That's when I had cut off from this earlier and rooted. So we're just going to tuck that in. I think I want some aloe. So we're going to just, since this needs to be taken apart anyway and redone. And yes, I promised my husband I will clean off the steps when I'm done here. He's laughing at me. But I'm going to tuck this one over here since I have something spiky over there. That will hopefully grow back the other direction a little bit as the sun hits it. And let's see, what else do we have? Let's take a few. Oh, we don't want to forget this guy. This is Adletiboria. This one I bought new this year. I thought it looked interesting with those fat little nodules down there. I have no idea what it's going to do, but we'll find out. It says it doesn't get too tall, so we're going to put that out here on the edge. And then I think we'll throw a couple hens and chicks in here just for filler for now. And again, I just went out to my garden and dug up a chunk. I'm going to see if we can get them to come apart a bit. And I have a lot of people say, my hens and chicks always die over the winter. How do you get them to overwinter? Well, the trick is put them where they will have good winter drainage. That means if it's a place where that stays wet, or the snow, when the snow melts, where it puddles, don't put them there. I have them along a sidewalk, a paver sidewalk, and that is, as you know, kind of a gravel rock base under there with soil on top on the edges. And they do very well there. I have never lost one there. We're just gonna tuck it in here, see what it does. You know, the trick is don't be afraid to try it. If it doesn't work, you learn something for next year. And we'll tuck a little one in here. Kind of sit it down there in the soil, and one more right here. And then I don't have it here with me. I have to find it somewhere in my gardening shed, wherever I put it away. But I'll have some poultry grit, which I will spread over the top around the plants. It keeps them a little bit drier if we do get into a rainy spell, and keeps the rot from setting in. Right now, I'm just going to give them a little And to start, I'm going to drizzle a little bit in each of these. And then I will see if I can pull my saran wrap off of here. There we go. And then I just kind of put this in here. Yeah, like I said, some of it's going to run out the bottom because it's not an air, you know, I don't have a real tight seal, but most of it will disperse along the way. So there you go, easy potting.